So the layout's all wired up. And does it work? No. Hi, welcome back to Chadwick Model Railway. I'm Charlie. If you remember in the last video, I installed a diamond crossing and injured myself in the process by smacking myself on the baseboards. Anyway, I've invested in a rather high-tech system of avoiding future injuries. It might seem rather silly, but it gets the job done. Anyway, enough of this joviality, back to the layout. So here's the diamond crossover that I installed last week, and I'd hoped that it would be without problems, and that clearly isn't the case, but we'll come on to that in a bit. With the wiring now complete, what I thought I'd do is just show you which systems I'm using. And I'm a Digitrax kind of guy, although for the basic stuff I still use my Dynamis. Whilst I use Digitrax, I'm not necessarily recommending that you go out and purchase it. It's just a system that I like, and there are lots of other decent systems on the market. However, there are other components that run with Digitrax, which I kind of like because it leads over to computer control. If I explain how the Digitrax system works, it will make more sense to you, hopefully, when I explain the wiring. So you have a 15 volt AC transformer feeding a DCS 100, which is the standard Digitrax controller. So you have the two cables going in there. Coming back out of the controller is your standard track feed, and also an earth cable, which they refer to as ground. There's a couple of switches. One's a kind of an off switch and a run, and the other is to select your scale, whether it be HO or 00, N gauge or O gauge. And there's also these two Loco Net ports. Now the Loco Net ports allow you to fit your controller, a little bit sort of clunky and a little bit old-fashioned, but it gets the job done, and it really is consistent with its performance. And the other one is for the Loco Net system. Now Loco Net is fed by a cable, and this goes out into the components and allows each component to communicate with each other and back to the Digitrax system, so that every component knows exactly what's going on. To allow ease of access, I've built a couple of these little flip down panels, so when the layout's running they'll just go up out of the way and fasten back. Of course, you can bring them down to modify them or make changes, and hopefully it's easier to get to rather than get underneath the boards and start waving soldering irons around and the rest of it. In this corner on the left hand side is a junction block which takes in the main power. And what I've done is I've put a little bit of this plug type chocolate box, so in goes the control from the main Digitrax controller, in goes the power, and then you get your red, black and earth cables coming in. When they come back out, they actually split into two, one to go to the outer track and one to go to the inner track. And the reason for that is that eventually they will be split into power districts, and so if there's a short on one power district, the other circuit will keep running. And there's an extra component to go in between, but that's a bit later down the road. This is the DS64. This controls 4 points. It has a separate power supply, and I mentioned about the Loco Net system, and this cable here, the Loco Net cable coming from the DCS 100, will plug into a DS64. The DS64 will then carry on looping it on to the next component. So from here it goes into a BDL168, which is used later on when I come to computer control, and then this cable here goes on to the next points controller, and then every component can talk to each other and to the controller, so that each component knows exactly what's going on. So looking back up the layout, I've installed something called a UP5, a little Digitrax component, which allows the controller to be placed anywhere you want on the layout. So this little panel goes on, there's a Loco Net feed in the back of it and off in the next direction, and obviously you can hold a little holder there for the controller. And then moving on up the room a bit further, there's the next set of flip down boards. Another facility that I built into the wiring was the ability to disconnect board 1 from board 2, and I did that again with another one of those plug-in type chocolate block connectors. The points aren't affected, but it is just the power that goes to both the inner and the outer tracks. Right, let's talk about the track power issue. I connected the boards up and everything worked fine. I had 15 volts running right through the track. I then connected boards 2 and 3 onto board 1 via that little plug-in socket, and that all worked fine as well. Which then takes, just mention, my Chadwick Parkway sign was brought to me by a very dear friend of mine, Simon. Thank you very much. I've just passed a milestone birthday. He bought me that, and I do appreciate it. Oh, and my hand, my latest injury is some kind of a sprained ganglion, but enough of me. So I wanted to test it all out. So I used this sound fitted Class 37 with a couple of parcels coaches, and I ran it around the layout, and that's where the trouble started. So here's the Class 37 with the sound switched on. And as I run it forwards, just over this fish plate, it's an insulated fish plate, but I need that for block control. So I turn the speed up to 15, and as the Loco runs over it, as you can see, things aren't rosy. When I fitted the Class 37 onto the other end of this parcels train and then ran it through the diamond crossing that I installed last week, which I'd tested quite intensely really, this happens. Now, it might not seem important, but the last thing you want is to start stuttering when it goes through that diamond crossing. The whole point of having a diamond crossing was for an efficient method of crossing the track. But when the Class 37 went across it, you hear the sound cut out, and it's obviously got a short. It's not there every time, but at the end of the day, what you want is a decent, reliable crossing. So, what to do next? Well, the track isn't the cleanest thing I've ever seen in the world, so what I thought I'd do is get the track rubber out and give it a damn good clean, but not only the diamond crossing, but I actually then used the Pico rubber and did the whole surface. Every single piece of track on boards 1, 2 and 3 I cleaned up, and then when I'd completed that, I give it a good hoover through to make sure there was no bits and bobs left lying around. So, did all the cleaning sort the problem out? Of course it didn't. I'd missed something quite obvious really. And that is when this Class 37 hits this insulated joiner, and then the sound cuts out because there's some kind of electrical problem, it's because of what's happening on the diamond crossing. And the problem is there's an old Lima parcels coach, and that's the problem that's causing the short. It just so happens that when it hits the diamond crossing, the Class 37 is just changing from one block to another. So there's nothing wrong with the 37, there's nothing wrong with the diamond crossing, it's just the fact that this old Lima parcels wagon has very wide wheels. So what are our alternatives? Well, we can simply never run that Lima parcels van through that diamond crossover, or we modify it, or we modify the point. Well, you can't modify the Lima bogies, they are what they are, so it's a case of either not running it through this diamond point, or we carry out a small modification to the diamond point. The first thing to do, of course, is to check the back-to-backs on this Lima wagon to make sure that they're in tolerance, and this is my back-to-back gauge and it's for 14.6. So all I do is whip out one of the axles and then with the back-to-back gauge is to slide it through the opening, and I just turn it over and then just push it into the bench, and then it does seem tight and that should bring it back into tolerance. So we'll pop that one back in and repeat it for the other three. So now with the Class 37 with its sound switched on, as I pull this Lima car through, now I've sorted the backs to back out, is it likely to cut it out? So yes, it does. It's much better there it goes again. So that's the back-to-backs checked, and three of the axles could do with a tweak and they're much better. And it does seem to be shorting out less. I can't really get it to work when it wants to. It's just a little bit more reliable, but not totally reliable. Now I've seen a video by Richard of Everard Junction, and he put a small slither of plastic into the point, but in the last video that I put up, a guy, David Martin, I'm extremely grateful to you, David, mentioned another little tip, and that was to use clear nail varnish. Clearly I've been at my wife's makeup drawer again. So what I'm going to try and do is paint the area that's shorting out, and I'll do a close-up in a second, with this nail varnish. I don't know how long it takes nail varnish to go off. We'll see, and see if that sorts out the problem. Right then, boots number 7. Best to use a clear nail varnish, obviously, but this is just a little bit of a pink tinge. And I'm wearing an optic visor here, so hopefully I can see a little better. I think that's got it. So there's that section there, and there must be a corresponding section further down. Then if this is a success, I'll obviously then paint it onto the to the frog going the other way. And I think we're there. Okay. Now a case of just letting this dry, and then see if we can reproduce the short circuit. Well, I don't believe we're quite there yet. Hopefully, I've taken the this axle out of the bogie of the Lima parcels van, and if you have one of these of your own, you can see exactly where I was painting, and there you can see it. And it's just between these two bits here where I was painting it. So clearly I haven't quite insulated it. So that one needs a bit more paint, sorry, a bit more nail varnish. But if we go back and look at the other one and see if I've cured the problem at this end. That appears to work. And now we haven't looked at the other side, so I'll now put it on the other side of the track. Oops. So it's just at this end here that appears to have the problem. So I need to put a bit more nail varnish on this one. There it goes. And it's actually because of the width of the wheel. With the Leamouth Parcels van now reassembled and the extra coat of nail varnish, it runs through extremely smoothly. There's no short circuits whatsoever, so it looks like David Martin's advice was very good and well founded. So thanks again, thank you very much. I suppose on a note of caution though, with this nail varnish on the tracks, of course it may create problems if you have small wheelbase locos such as 040s and 060s, so do tread carefully. In my case it doesn't matter really, most of mine are long wheelbase diesels, but just something to keep in mind. Of course this nail varnish will come straight back off again. It's only going to be a track rubber and that kind of thing, so it should be quite straightforward. Well, thank you Martin for your tip, that seemed to work fine. On the subject of tips and tricks perhaps, if you have any that we wish to share so that we can all learn, please leave them in the comments below, and in the next couple of weeks I'll try to put together a video on your best tips and tricks. So in the meantime, you know what to do. There should be video there, and don't forget to subscribe. See you the next time. Take care. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.